and members of Nigerian Labour Congress, Lagos branch, also the acting registrar of the Institute, Institute of Corporate and Public Sector Professionals, all fellows of the Institute, associates, and members of the Institute, and other eminent personalities. Chief Ogus, you have the floor, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Abbas, thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to start by commending the Institute of Corporate and Public Sector for this new act. And of course, we will need to commend the Presidential Enabling Business Council, that is PEBEC, that is headed by the Vice President, and of course with the Secretariat headed by Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, because they were actually involved in the coming out of this act. And of course, we also need to commend the 8th and 9th Assembly for the easy passage of the act. We said that well, our presentation is in two parts, Part A and Part B, because as much as possible, Part A will discuss highlights, innovations that CAMA 2020 brought into focus. And of course, thank you. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, thank you very much, Dolapo. Okay. Yeah, the contents of this presentation, as you can see on the screen, will briefly introduce the act, the objectives of our presentation, which of course is anchored around the gains that these small and medium scale enterprises would benefit from the act. And of course, we will look at business entities regulated by CAMA 2020. And of course, the structure of CAMA 2020, small and medium enterprises, and key provisions in CAMA 2020 that promotes the ease of doing businesses in Nigeria. Such key innovations like the one-person company, you are able to form a company just on your own. And of course, one director for small scale, for small companies, the fact that they do not even need to hold AGMs as like before. And of course, electronic innovations. And of course, we'll also be looking at the elimination of company secretaries and that of company auditors, and the replacement of the authorized share capital with the issue share capital. And of course, the mandatory common seal that was required in the past is no longer going to be, and a completely new set of doing business was introduced, the limited liability partnership and of course the limited partnership, and the replacement of the declaration of the statement of declaration by the statement of compliance. And of course, you also have the issue of significant control, that is the disclosure of person with significant control or substantial shareholding. And we'll try and also look at the potential issues of threats in CAMA 2020 for SMEs. Abbas said, the act was signed by the president into law on the 7th of August. Of course, CAMA is the principal law regulating the formation, operation, and dissolution of companies in Nigeria. And of course, it was signed shortly after the Finance Act itself was signed in January. And the act is ultimately, we promote investments, create more jobs, and promote a friendly business climate in Nigeria. There's no doubt that that will be. And what this means is that CAMA 1990 has been replaced. It has been repealed and replaced by CAMA 2020. Of course, I know that the journey started in 1968, and of course in 1990 was reviewed, and 30 years after, this act is now replacing the Act of 1990. Like we said, in this presentation, we will highlight some of the key provisions in the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 and discuss how they will impact on small and medium enterprises, and in particular, how these provisions will enhance the ease of doing business in this country. Now, it's important to know that business entities regulated by CAMA are the private companies, public companies, companies limited by guarantee, unlimited companies, business enterprises, incorporated trustees, and a very new concept, the limited liability partnerships and limited partnerships. Looking at CAMA 2020, CAMA 2020 is made up of 870 sections and divided into 7 parts. In short, about 167 new provisions were added to the 1990 CAMA. And of course, many of which are targeted at the MSMEs, because it definitely will reduce the cost of doing business, and the speed with which doing business is also considered before coming out with this. Small and medium enterprises, what are they? Because we said that micro, small and medium enterprises play a very big role in the Nigerian economy and economies around the globe. SMEs are very important for economic and social reasons, given the sector's role in employment. Fortunately, there isn't a set definition of SME that applies globally, because each country gets to set its own definition, and they may also decide to set specific limits for specific industries. Nigeria is largely denominated by medium and small scale enterprises, because making registration easier for them brings in more businesses into the formal space. This will also enhance tax revenue for government. And like we said, the new CAMA contains certain provisions for that will enhance doing business in Nigeria. And of course, if you look at the redefinition, there's a redefinition of a small company going forward now. In 1990, a small company, for you to qualify as a small company, some of these provisions, these features must be present. You have a turnover of 2 million and a net asset of 1 million. But going forward, the turnover that characterizes a small company is that it must not be more than 120 million, and the net asset of not more than 60 million. And what this means is that more and more businesses definitely will come into the group of corporate entities. Now, if you look at the Nigerian economy, and going by the report of the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics in 2019, about 96% of Nigerian businesses are what? They constitute about 96%. And we have about 41.5 million SMEs that contribute about 48% to the gross domestic product. What it means is that SMEs are the engine of economic development. And of course, whatever would make business attractive to them would in all promote economic development in the country, which we think CAMA 2020 will do. Now, like I said, this presentation is divided into two parts. Part A and Part A, that where we looked at the key provisions in CAMA that will promote the ease of doing business in Nigeria, and Part B, where we also looked at some of the threats that would result as a result of this CAMA 2020. Now we're going to go through some of the provisions in CAMA 2020 that we think will promote the ease of doing business in Nigeria. And as shown in on the screen, the first issue we are bringing to focus is the one-person company. Section 18, subsection 2 of this new CAMA has given rights to forming a company to even just one person. A single person can form a company. The new CAMA makes it possible to establish a private company with only one member or shareholder. That is one person company, which we tagged the OPC. Of course, this is good news for growing startups and young entrepreneurs because it has totally resolved business registration bottlenecks. A lot of businesses have been forced into unnecessary partnerships because prior to the new CAMA, to legally own a business in Nigeria, you needed to provide at least 2 or more people as co-owners of the business. It will make it possible for business owners who currently trade as sole proprietors to register a company without the need to bring in new owners or directors at the initial stage and continue to run their business as before. But this time with added benefits of the fact that the liability will now be limited, and of course they will continue to have access to credit. If you look at even the current business space in Nigeria, you agree with me that some of these SMEs, their outlook, they have this corporate outlook. They want to see themselves as companies. Even if you go to Alaba, for instance, you see sole traders with beautiful call cards in which they would have described themselves as the CEOs of their company, which means they will want to form companies. And of course, this act will definitely make that possible for them. And of course, CAMA 2020 in section 271, as against what we had in 1990, small companies are now permitted to have a single director. That is, with just one director, you could have a company of your own. And the issue of annual general meetings. In the past, all companies must hold AGMs, annual general meetings. But going forward, section 237 has exempted any company, small companies, from holding an annual general meeting. Since if you have a single shareholder, you are now exempted from annual general meeting. Of course, we know the cost implication that will be to them. Then, of course, in the past, all companies must hold their AGMs in Nigeria. And virtual AGMs were not recognized. But going forward, except for small companies and companies with single shareholders, All statutory meetings and AGMs must be held in Nigeria. Private companies may hold virtual general meetings, provided that such meetings are conducted in accordance with the articles of the company. And this new CAMA has introduced some electronic innovations. CAMA 2020 contains several innovations that reflect the realities of conducting business in this digital space age. For instance, Section 731, subsection 2, now permits company records to be maintained in electronic format, as against the hard copies we used to have. And of course, Section 175, subsection 1, permits that electronic share certificate, the shares transfer forms will be accepted by all companies. And of course, any document required to be annexed to the annual return that companies make to the CAC can, before it used to be in hard copy, you can now even do it in electronic form. That to us will reduce the cost of business doing business, and of course, it will fasten the processes of doing business. Yes, there is another requirement. There's another section that in the past, all companies must have, were supposed to have company secretaries. But going forward, company secretaries are not required to have, small companies are not required to have a company secretary. And of course, what that means is that would have reduced the cost of doing business, because of course, they would not need to pay for the services of company secretary. Yet another innovation that was not there before is the Section 402 that now exempts companies from appointing auditors. Going forward, small companies or any company having a single shareholder are no longer mandated to appoint auditors at the annual general meeting to audit the financial records of the company. There's provision for the exemption in relation to the audit of accounts in respect of the financial year. Small companies and companies that have not carried out businesses since incorporation are exempted from the requirement to the audit of their accounts, other than insurance companies, banks, or any other company prescribed by the Commission from time to time. Of course, you will see that there is an imminent conflict between CAMA and CETA. If you look at CAMA, CAMA says that if you have a turnover of no more than 120 million, you are a small company. With a net assets of no more than 60 million, you are a small company. But of course, CETA, via the Finance Act, that categorize companies into three types. Small companies are companies whose turnover should not be more than 20 million. So there is an imminent conflict between CAMA and CETA. While also CETA says that, of course, you must file your returns to the FROS, and in filing your returns, you have to annex your audited accounts. What it means is that small companies will still need the services of auditors. Now, going forward, the authorized share capital has been replaced with minimum share capital. And what that means is that you only operate the share capital that you can that you need at any particular stage of your business, unlike before. That will mean that whatever shares you do not need, you don't bring them into your books. Going forward, company Cs are now a story of the past, because companies shall have common Cs with the provision of CAMA 1990. But going forward, the company is no longer under an obligation to have or to use a common C. When a company decides to have a common C, the design and use shall be regulated by the company's articles. And of course, we said a new concept has been introduced, which is the limited liability partnership as against what we currently have in the country, that of general partnership. With a limited liability partnership, you can now have a partnership that has a legal entity that is considered as a separate legal entity that can sue and be sued in its name and may acquire, own, hold, and develop or dispose property using its name as against what we used to have. I think I experienced, I was in a friend's, in a meeting that where these men from South Africa wanted to start company. They particularly opted for limited liability partnership. What they were advised by their lawyers was that at that time they can't go into that, and they were forced to start a limited liability company. But going forward, you see business promoters that can start businesses in this form, limited liability partnership or limited partnership. And of course, what it means is that it has now introduced organizational flexibility and the tax status of a partnership with the limited liability of members of a company, which was not there in the past. Going forward, we said that the statement of compliance has now been replaced, the declaration of compliance. And of course, in the past, you need the declaration of compliance to be signed by a lawyer when you register your company. But going forward, you do not need that because you can sign the statement of compliance yourself and all registration processes, of course, and submit your form to the commission. Now, a very fundamental innovation that was brought into focus by CAMA 2020 has to do with disclosure of persons with significant controls, stroke substantial shareholding, of course. And this will definitely promote transparency and we even reduce corruption. Because what CAMA says now is that if you have significant shares in a company and 5% of the interest, you are supposed to disclose that to the company within 7 days. And the company in turn should disclose it to the commission. This we think will enhance transparency as much as possible. Of course, it's also going to reduce the cost of registering charges because in the past, registration of charges was 1% for small companies and 2% for big companies. But it's now a flat rate of 0.35%, which will reduce registration costs by 65% for small companies and 82.5% for big companies. There's also a restriction on the shares of the private company. It introduces in section 22 a statutory right of first offer, so that if you need to sell the shares to an outsider, it's now compulsory going forward that the existing shareholder must show some interest of either acquiring. Of course, if they want to acquire, it means you have to sell to them. Otherwise, you can now sell to outsider. And there's also a new innovation that says that if you need to sell the assets of the company to the extent that it amounts to a value of 50% of the total assets of the company, then it means all the shareholders of the company must assent to that. Otherwise, you cannot do that. And with this, that would reduce, it will enhance transparency and reduce corruption, as the case may be. And it has also introduced provisions to rescue a company in distress to prevent companies from going insolvent, as the case was in the past. We said the new act introduced a framework for rescuing a company in distress and to keep it alive as against allowing such entity to become insolvent. Provisions were made with respect to company voluntary arrangements and medicine, and of course, administration. Going forward, as we had in Section 849, this act has introduced a new innovation that has to do with the merger of incorporated trustees. In the past, there was no specific provision for that. But going forward, the new act extends merger beyond LLCs to incorporated trustees, and course Section 849 implies that two or more NGOs, long as they have similar goals and the same objective, they can merge to form one single organization. A notable feature of the provision is the power of the CAC to suspend trustees and appoint interim managers to oversee the affairs of the IT, where such suspension is desirable in the public interest or due to incidents of misconduct, management, or fraud. This has attracted so much attention and criticisms from the public. Of course, no single law is passed and becomes so perfect immediately. And I want to believe that all these are issues that will be resolved going forward, maybe in future amendments. And of course, particularly the conflict that we said exists between the CAMA. This CAMA sees you as a small company, and of course, with 120 million and below, they are a small company. But of course, it conflicts with the position of CETA. CETA says in the Finance Act that a small company is one that has a turnover of no more than 20 million. What it means is that if you have 60 million turnover, in the eye of the tax laws, you are not a small company. However, in the eye of CAMA, you are a small company. It means you, the business entrepreneur, has to look at these two acts together. You cannot deal with them in isolation. This is what we are saying. And while we are rounding up for the first part of this presentation, I think I will have to hand over to our host, Mr. Bello, to continue. I want to believe that he's going to give a break, depending on him, going to give a break of 3 minutes before we go to the next part. But we want to say that with these innovations, so many small companies will now start seeing multiplicities of small companies doing business in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oguns, for the beautiful presentation. I want to believe this part has actually opened us to so many things that we are not too familiar with. One thing I've actually gained from your presentation is that you made mention of OPC, that is Section 18, that actually authorized one person to own a company in Nigeria. Of course, in the past, there must be at least 2 shareholders to run a company. But going forward, this new CAMA has given every person to own his or her own company. Another beautiful thing that this CAMA is brought in, like you mentioned, is that all companies must hold their AGM, but a small business, that is a small business who has just one shareholding, need not to hold AGM. Of course, it is also important to see that virtual meetings are now entertained in the country. Where before now, we used to have people who have to gather together to hold the AGM. I think these are the new innovations that this new CAMA is bringing into law. I also gain one particular thing that you mentioned. You said that companies can now hold or maintain their records in electronic format, not unlike before, where we have to put all our records in black and white. Of course, if a particular bank or a particular institution is requesting for any documentation, you need to carry Ghana must go to them in order to give them what they want. But now and going forward, I think these records can be done electronically. You also mentioned that electronic shares of transferred, among others. One thing also that the CAMA is also trying to, that's also trying to, that we're also leveraging on is that a small business needs not to have a company secretary. Of course, before now, every business or every corporate entity must have a company secretary. But going forward now, even the shareholder himself can stand in as his company secretary. I think that is section 330 of the CAMA. You also mentioned something about, a common sale, among others. You also mentioned that there's the introduction of partnership businesses, limited liability partners, and the likes. I think these are things that small business owners are actually looking at. Um, in about any moment from now, we'll be going to the second part of the presentation, and that will be looking at the various contributions that the SMEs will be giving to us. Chief Ogusa, thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Can you unmute Chief Oguns, please? Can you unmute Chief Oguns, please?
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
It's okay now.
Yes, you can go on now. We can hear you. Yes, let him go on now. We can hear him now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dolapo. What we are going into the second part of this presentation, which in which we will look at some potential issues of threats in CAMA 2020 for SMEs. We consider them as potential issues of threats in CAMA 2020. Remember that we've said that some of these innovations, such as a single person, one person company, electronic registration, electronic signatures, annual general meetings, virtual meetings are now permitted. No, of course, exemption from the appointment of company secretaries, a redefinition of small company, electronic copy for registrars, a reduced cost for registry security, and of course, the consent of the Attorney General, particularly as it has to do with companies limited by guarantee, the common seal no longer required, and of course, small companies also now being exempted from appointing auditors. And we believe that SMEs in the printing and publishing sectors will also be hit by this act, and the implications for migrating to limited liability companies. Some of these we will now look at them critically to unravel what we call potential issue of threats to them. Of course, taking the first one, where the one that we called OPC, that is one person company, as in section 2, subsection 18, subsection 2 of CAMA 2020, where you can now go ahead and start your own company. Before this time, you cannot, one single person cannot form a company. But going forward, you can now form a company. You will agree with me that Some people who have very good ideas, they want to go solo. But in the past, that wasn't possible because you must look for co-partners to continue with the company. But going forward now, you can form a company. But again, if we look at it, remember that if you are now a company, we should. There are so many statutory obligations that go ahead that comes along with the formation of country of a single man forming a company. So that again should be an issue. Now, of course, if you look at electronic registration, the Act has codified the option to electronically file documents as an alternative to physical filing with the Commission. This definitely will enhance the ease of doing business as it will improve the turnaround time for company incorporation and business setup processes. But again, it is good to mention that the Commission will need to upgrade its IT systems to minimize downtimes and to ensure reliability of the electronic filing system. Because that, from experience, we know the operation of the CAC when it comes to the formation of companies, where some people, you may have to wait to get the outcomes of some of these processes. Then, of course, you also have the electronic signatures. Yes, it's very good, but there will be need to worry about cyber security. Of course, the more we go electronic, the more the risk of cybercrime challenges. Of course, this we consider as threat in CAMA. And many SMEs provide services in the physical space for the AGM. Of course, we know that going forward now, small companies do not need to have AGMs. What immediately is likely to happen is that some other SMEs will be affected. Remember, in the past, AGMs, where they are conducted, then the activities of companies in the SMEs in the hospitality industry cannot be undermined because they have to provide catering services, decoration, and rental services. But of course, that will not be again, which will affect their own operation and lead to a reduction of revenue from that part, on their own part. And of course, the appointment of company secretary. Going forward, small companies are exempted from appointing company secretaries. That's a very good one because, of course, in terms of cost, it will reduce the cost of operation so that they can now focus on their operations proper. Well, again, we have so many professionals who run SMEs and offer secretarial services. Definitely, it's going to affect them. And in all of this, it's necessary to say that there will be winners and losers. Then, of course, the definition of small company. Both CAMA and CETA have different definitions of a small company. Of course, we said the basis for categorizing a small company going by CETA is turnover of not more than 25 million. However, CAMA sees you as a small company if you have a turnover of between 0 and 120 million, which means there's an imminent conflict between how CAMA sees you and how CETA sees you. Of course, that issue will need to be reconciled. Of course, we know that you cannot take the legislation, you must work with the true legislation. And of course, there is need to reconcile this. And of course, what it means is that, of course, like I said, a law cannot just in the first instance become perfect. We're likely not to have a perfect law. But going forward, this will be an issue that in the future, maybe they'll have to look at it. And reducing costs for registering securities. That, again, is the concept of the Attorney General for companies limited by guarantee. Those days, it's if you want to start a company by guarantee, you are supposed to apply to the Attorney General, who will give approval within 30 days. But going forward, this act now says that if in the event that you are not getting a response from the Attorney General within 30 days, then it just goes straight to the national dailies, publish in 3 national dailies. The applicants will publish in 3 national dailies. And of course, in the event that there is no response from the public against the formation of such, you approach the commission, who definitely will give you approval. Now, there's also, we said, exemption from appointing auditors. Though there's still a relief to small businesses in terms of their costs, but of course it poses a threat to small professional accountants. So they are everywhere, and of course, who depends on SMEs to prepare audited accounts. That would mean loss of revenue for them. And like we said, there will be winners, there will be losers. And we know again to pushing to, I mean, it's a kind of relief to auditors that even because of the conflict between CETA and CAMA, there's no way the auditors can be, the companies can do without the small company, because you cannot file your returns without annexing the audited report. And of course, if you have to annex the audited report, you also have to engage the services of, who knows, maybe they could be doing this on ad hoc basis now, because since the law says you can do without the auditors. Of course, and the other part of it says you cannot submit the returns to FRS without annexing your audit report. We have said that virtual meetings are now permitted. And of course, AGMs too are no longer required, no longer mandatory for small companies. But if you look at these SMEs in the printing and publishing sectors, it will definitely have, they'll be affected, because the more we go digital, of course, there's nothing that is wrong with going digital. It's not that we are undermining going digital from this side of the presentation. But we know that as you go digital, the more we pose a threat to SMEs in that sector. Remember that they have to print receipts and invoices and annual reports. Of course, these SMEs will be in danger. That, like we said, that is not to diminish going digital, but we need to bring it to our attention that it's going to stand a kind of threat to them, because it's going to affect their revenue. Then, what of the SMEs in the hospitality industry? Virtual meetings is no longer is going to be the order of the day, but we also know it's going to impair on the hospitality industry, because hotels, for example, we said they depend on rentals and catering income for physical meetings. Then come and look at SMEs in the aviation sector. Going forward, virtual meetings will now be the order of the day. What it means is that there will be less travels, because you do not need to leave your London base to come to Nigeria to hold meeting with your business counterparts in Nigeria. And I'll probably not need to go to Abuja to hold meetings with my partner. All we just do is to focus on our laptop, and we'll continue to hold our meetings. And what it means is that it will have an impact on those SMEs in the aviation sector. Remember that travel agencies and car hire services will likely bear some costs as a result of going virtual, because that would mean lower business for them. And of course, the implications of migrating to limited liability company. CETA would apply to the entity migrating to limited liability company status, even if you are not paying tax. Remember, you still need to have to file your returns. I think with this, we have looked at some of the threats, some of the potential threats that we notice in this new law, CAMA 2020. And in all, we believe that the new CAMA 2020 is definitely an improvement on the current legislation and will significantly enhance the ease of doing business in Nigeria. Definitely, it would increase our World Bank rating of doing business. The bold reforms contained in the new act, we have seen some of them conforms with international global best practices. And of course, the amendment made to the Companies and Other Matters Act will definitely have a positive effect on Nigeria's landscape in terms of doing business. It is hoped, we said you will not have a perfect law at any time, but we hope that the practical administration of the CAMA 2020 by the Commission will help ease the strain of doing business in Nigeria and further improve Nigeria's position in the global index. In summary, CAMA Act will surely is not bill because it has moved from bill to act. The CAMA Act will surely give rise to many small businesses, make the country more attractive to foreign investors, and positively impact the lives of millions of Nigerians. Thank you very much. As we end this presentation and move over to Mr. Abbas. Mr. Abbas, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Ugo, for your beautiful presentation of the part 2. I must commend you for the job well done, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of these discussions from you. This part 2 actually discussed the potential issues or threats in the CAMA 2020. Like we all know, there is nothing that will have advantage that will never have a disadvantage. Thank you for the beautiful presentation of the part 2. Questions are coming in. And this section is going to be question and answer section in about 5 minutes or thereabout. 5 to 10 minutes, we'll be doing justice to all the questions. Mr. Chief Ogus will be doing justice to all the questions that we have. Chief Ogus, my first question here is that this new CAMA, when will it be effective? This new CAMA, sir, when will it be effective?
I want to believe that we are talking of the commencement.
On the commencement date, yeah, exactly, sir.
Can we unmute Chief Oguns? Can we unmute?
Thank you, Mr. Abbas. Mr. Abbas, you know I'm not a lawyer, but I just know that because I've interacted with several of my lawyer friends who said some of the act was signed into law on the 7th of August. He said until it is gazetted, until the law is gazetted, I will have a code number. And of course, it will not. And I think it should have been done. I have to find out if it's been gazetted. So as at 7th of August, it has not commenced. But if it's gazetted, then it becomes law. I think that should.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I also have another question here, sir. The question is the CAMA and the CETA. There have been some conflicting pronouncements from them. With this new CAMA, sir, how can we, or which of the laws will prevail? Thank you, sir.
I think you are boxing me to an angle that has to do with law I'm just a chartered accountant that deals with figures, less of law. But I've also have a training on this somewhere where the lawyers said that if there is a general law, as in CAMA 2020, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, on a matter that has a specific act, that usually the specific act will prevail. So if that is correct, what it means is that CAMA conflicting with CETA will prevail. So it means a small company in the eye of CETA is that has a turnover of not more than 25 million. Whereas the CAMA says that with your 120 million, there is a small company. That is an imminent conflict. And if the position of what I gather from the lawyers is correct, it means it's a small company with a 25 million turnover will come to stay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the beautiful answer, sir. There's another question here, sir. The question is one of our attendees is asking, say thanks for this beautiful, brilliant presentation regarding to the formation of OPC. Are sole traders, shop owners, and owners of entity business also allowed to set up OPC? I think this question is asked by Mr. De Dolapo Amidele.
Okay, I think it's a very beautiful question, and I want to say that is the intention of the act. That's like during the presentation I said, if you look at so many of these business enterprises, go to Alaba. As you discuss with them, they would have been exchanging their cards with you, and then just look at those cards. Beautiful positions and designations. CEO, Akane and Co. Company. Meanwhile, they are business enterprises. And with CAMA 2020, you're going to have multiplicity of them because a single person can now have a company who can be as the director of the company, irrespective of the issues that we raise, but at least maybe compliance, statutory compliance issues that you have to do with, but forming a company. One person can form a company.
Thank you so much, sir, for the answer. I also have another question from the same person. And the question says, with new provisions on restrictions of the shares of private companies, if 1% of the shareholders disagree with the majority 99% of shareholders' decision to sell assets, having a value of more than 50% of the total assets of the company, what will happen?
That's yet again another beautiful question, and definitely will be an eye-opener for those that are responsible for issuing guidelines on these laws, because the law says that for you to sell the assets of the company to the tune of 50%, you must get approval from all the members of the company. All. Of course, that is an issue that I say that going forward, that will be addressed. I want to believe that we are at the teaching stage of this law, and from time to time, we should be expecting guidelines from the Commission as to ease the operation of this law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate you for this fantastic answer. And there are two questions. I think the two attendees are asking the same question. I think it goes with the same question that I asked you earlier. That what is the position of the law when there are two conflicting interpretations of the new CAMA and other relevant pronouncements. I think another one here is
Can we have all the other questions?
persist
We have all the other questions sent
in
by
the conflict.
Abbas. Can we have those questions sent to the Institute Secretariat, and Chief Oguns will provide answers to them, and they will be on the Institute website for
Okay, sir.
proper solutions to the question, so that we can do the cutting as we've planned. That session will not be more than 1 hour. Thank you so much.
Audience, attendees, and the panelists, I would like to thank you all for your time, for spending the time that is not there to attend this beautiful presentation. All questions that are coming in will be answered. They will be pasted on the Institute website. You can contact IPSP, the Institute of Corporate and Public Sector Professionals, on the web by visiting us on www.ipsp.org. You can also send a mail to us on info@icpc.org. You can also reach us on our Twitter page, likewise on Instagram, as well as on Facebook. All these social handles, we are there to meet with your needs. You can also to become a member of the institute. It's very, very easy. Our lines are open, our internet are open everywhere, and always find us. In this closing remark, we want to personally thank Chief Oguns for his time for presenting this beautiful trending topic. I also want to recognize our strategic partner once again, G. Osage and Co. Chartered Accountant, located in the heart of Lagos, Ikeja. Our international partner, we are saying thank you to you, London Center for Trade and Development. Likewise, the chairman and members of Nigerian Labour Congress, Lagos branch. I would also like to thank the acting registrar of the Institute, all fellows, associates, and members of the Institute, and other eminent personalities. On this remark, on this note, we are going to be drawing our curtain until next time. Thank you all for your time and everything. God bless.
Can Chief Oguns give us a closing remark?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Abbas. I want to use this opportunity to thank the Institute of Corporate and Public Sector Professionals, like I said, for putting this together. And as I want to give you this solemn promise that as much as possible, we will always give you support. If in the future you also need us to come around to say certain things or support in any form, we should do that. I thank you for the honor given to me, and the partners of my firm are also extending their appreciation. And we say that going forward, the firm of G. Osage and Cultural Accountant is ready to support the Institute of Corporate and Public Sector Professionals in any form possible. Thank you. I also want to thank my staff that one way or the other contributed to the success of this webinar, and my partners in Abuja. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of the event.
dignity.